real life about one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would note that Mr. Adler's question has not yet been answered. But I want to start by asking, out of respect for the American public and the Epstein survivors, some of whom, of course, are here today, that we can have a transparent conversation and get...
Hey, so, I know you've been there already, but Pooh just called and said I can come through and get a tour of Dre's studio as a thank you for what we did for him. Lamar crazy ass her, so you know that fool gonna be there too. But it's gonna be cool. We'll do it whenever it's good for you. Man, I'm excited for this. Look, bring a friend if you like. This one gonna hit different, alright? Peace, homie.
In the second email, Epstein writes to Steve Tisch about a Ukrainian girl, noting that she was, quote, a little freaked out by the age difference and stating that he would try to convince her not to return to Ukraine. He then instructs Mr. Tisch to call him.
Okay, the networks are down, the equipment is ready, and we've crippled their supplies. Mrs. Rackman has written our check and given us the green light. We're good to finally move on that submarine and stop this threat once and for all. When you're ready, get your crew together and head back to planning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Bondi, it's been reported that there were at one point 1,000 personnel assigned to the task of identifying and scrubbing Donald Trump's name from the Epstein files. Were those reports accurate?
Please have your passport or identification ready for a minimum wage employee to scowl at.
I believe his name has appeared countless times in the documents that have been released. If I could finish,
I just asked this. I just simply asked whether or not it was true that it was 1,000 folks who were assigned that task. Were those reports accurate?
There are more than 500 attorneys and reviewers. I cannot give you an exact number.
And I wanted to ask you about that also, because it's a different question that you're getting to now. There were 500 DOJ lawyers and others assigned the task of redacting the appropriate information, including identities of the Epstein victim survivors from the Epstein files prior to their release. 500, is that correct?
If I could have finished my answer, there were more than 500 attorneys and reviewers who assisted with the...
That answers my question, ma'am, and I'm going to move on. I'm going to move on. General Bondi, would you agree? General Bondi, would you agree that your 8 years of service as the state of Florida's Attorney General, the third largest state in the nation, served as an excellent preparation for your current role as Attorney General for the United States of America?
Not only that, I was a career prosecutor for
18 years.
18 years.
18 years. 18 years.
I secured an answer. This is theatrical.
For 18 years, I secured serious felony cases, including drug cases, correct?
Oh, I prosecuted homicides. I prosecuted capital cases. I prosecuted domestic violence cases. I prosecuted multiple cases, and that's why I feel for all of these victims. And did you ask Eric Garland this?
You also prosecuted sexual assault cases and child sex trafficking cases, correct?
I answered that question earlier. I prosecuted multiple cases. When I was prosecuting,
an experienced and seasoned.
18 years.
Mr. Chairman, will you remind her of the rules? The time belongs to the member of the committee.
You are a seasoned and experienced prosecutor, correct?
I think we've established that.
Yes or no?
Does he want an answer or not?
He wants to say
Yes or no answer.
I think he wants to say that.
I'll live with what you have already said. Let me ask you this question. In the prosecution of sexual assault cases, you are acutely aware of how important it is to protect the identity of victims of sexual assault, correct?
I have addressed this multiple times. I think others were cutting me off when I was trying.
I just simply asked, are you aware of the fact that it's vitally important to protect the identity of sexual assault victims as you prosecute the people they accuse of assaulting them? Isn't that correct?
You see,
As we have said multiple times,
Protection of the
protection of all
identity
victims
of the victims
are
is so
protected.
very
You are
important.
protected under. Do you want me to answer or do you want to interrupt?
Well, because you're not answering the question, you do a Jekyll and Hyde kind of routine around here, and I just want you to answer my questions.
What is Jekyll and Hyde mean?
Well, it means you're nice to the Republicans and you turn like Hyde on Democrats. But let me ask you this, man. We have the Epstein victim survivors here today. Representative Jayapal asked a simple question: if you would be so kind and honorable as to turn around and face them and apologize to them for outing them. I mean, how many lives have been derailed because your department was either sloppy and incompetent or willfully trying to intimidate and punish these ladies?
Time about it.
Now, guess what's it?
Support journalism, trust. Support PBS News.
And fuck PBS News, bitch. Fuck you. And PBS News. Fucking supporting no fucking PBS News, bitch.
Absentee votes are not a part of the master list. And so you should not give anybody asking for any information any of the absentee votes data, because that's where they're stealing elections. If you're in a residential facility, if you're not in a residential facility, then you can only vouch for a maximum of 8 registers. And you can do that the day of the election. Prosecutors say instead of helping people find stable housing, they stole more than $3.5 million from the program that shut down late last year. Voter fraud in Minnesota now coming to the forefront after a new report from Alpha News saying in an exclusive, they've got a conversation here with this woman called Representative Pam Altendorf, who in Minnesota demanded access to their voter records to see whether there was massive fraud happening there, saying she's being stonewalled and saying we need help in Minnesota. We're going to look at some of what she's uncovered here today and then see why they're so opposed to having any voter accountability, voter ID, making sure that citizens are actually voting. But the story is from Alpha News, and we got a summary of it over here from this fella called Drew Roach in Minnesota, asking what is their Secretary of State hiding? Of course, we know Brad Raffensperger hid a bunch of stuff from us in Georgia, Shenna Bellows, we've got Jenna Griswold, we have Jocelyn Benson, we had Katie Hobbs, the Barbie Bimbo in Arizona. Now we got Steve Simon. He's asking, as a Minnesota Republican, I got a duty to make sure that our elections are fair. But this guy, the secretary, is actively obstructing oversight. Back in November last year, his North Star notes, he explicitly is instructing auditors that providing the master voter list is optional. The guidance says your office may choose whether you can provide this stuff. It's called a master list. And now what's happening is that master list is being perverted as part of a cover-up. And this is what this woman is explaining to us here. We've got mounting concerns of voter fraud, billions of dollars of fraud already uncovered. It's only money, though, for Leary centers. Of course, it's not elections that are fraudulent. This woman called Pam Altendorf, Republican. She represents the Red Wing area, serves as the vice chair of the Minnesota House Elections Committee. She hopped on this podcast with Liz Collins. We'll listen to a little bit of it. But the conversation was like this. She asked for
very
records,
nicely.
and it came about
Nice place
after
you've got.
the
Very,
DOJ was
chic.
rejected. Remember, Harvey Dillon
like
is
a
launching
bourgeois
lawsuits
bank
all
robber
over
to
the
remind me
country
how
saying,
strange
hey,
Los
you have an
Santos has
obligation
become.
to
In
give
my
us
day,
election
the
records
psychos
so that
at
we can
least had the
validate that you're
dignity to
following
be
federal law.
psychotic.
They refused to do that,
Nowadays,
so
it's all
she
about,
went and asked for the
home
data
furnishing
herself.
and
We
going
feel by
straight.
state statute that I have
Right,
access
ready?
to this info, so that's what I did.
Because
I knocked on the
this
door of 4 counties.
is
And
it.
now we're seeing some
But
interesting things
it's not
happen.
it,
The
but
secretary,
it's something,
in a
it's something
directive,
very,
redefined what we
big.
call the
I'm
master
not quite
list.
ready yet,
And
but
with
I
the
wanted
voter
to
list
see how
is
you're
the
doing.
list. The master list
What
is
I've
the
got
information of the
is a
voters that
fleece
you know
of
will
bank
hold it in the counties.
franchise,
And
and
that was
it's nothing too
redefined. And then it was
complicated.
specifically
There's
said
no
to
bind.
not give
But
you certain
normally, there
information
would be a
in the
bind.
list. In other words, the secretary told the counties, don't give her the data. 3 counties
This
did share
time
some
I'll
of it, but when she
cover
looked
the
into
upfront
Hennepin
costs.
County, it
Call it
consisted
the
of
price of
830,000
getting a look
voter
at you.
records.
And there's no
And
risk to
what
you.
she found was surprising.
Unless, of course,
She
you
posted
count
this top-level
getting locked up.
summary of just a few things
Shot.
I found on the Hennepin
So,
list.
you
One
ready?
county in
What do you think?
Minnesota.
Questions, comments,
7,779 challenged
All right.
voters. Almost
What are you waiting
3,000
for?
voters
Let's go
with
see this
missing
place.
data. 79% voters are in check ID status, which is not a lot. 503 voters are 100 years or older. 21% of the voters in Ilhan Omar's district, 21.6% of them are being challenged. 1/5 of the voters in Ilhan's district are being challenged, and much more. Voters are missing birth dates and everything. Minnesota media needs to report on these. They haven't done that. But in the 11 years as the Secretary of State, he gives this info to private companies called Eric, but refuses to allow the feds to look at it, refuses to allow local politicians to look at it, and so everybody needs to demand accountability up there. And more comes out here. In one precinct, it's called the P6 of Ward 2, there were so many challenged voters that it equates to 21% of the voters, just in one precinct. That is significantly higher than the state average in any other precinct. He also identified other concerns about voter info. Almost 3,000 have
There's a
missing
franchise
info
on the
according to
Western
federal
Highway
law,
near
and have
Chumach.
that
Take
happen.
us there.
It also says, look here, many
Word
people
of warning,
100 years
you're
old.
on
They
the
reached
job
out to
right
Minnesota
now,
and
so
the
don't
Secretary
let
of
the
State.
cops
He said,
notice
well,
you.
you know, some of these are
Come after us,
placeholders.
we
Like
call
some
it
people don't
off.
have their birth years in there, so we add in 1900 as a
So,
placeholder,
my
but it's not
taciturn
fraud.
friends,
But we
I
do need to
suppose
fix
you
it.
want to know
Many
how we're
people are
doing
questioning
this.
the elections. Alpha
Well,
News
you should
reached
ask.
out with
We're
comment. They
driving
did
out
not
to the
dispute
bank,
their
taking a
findings,
look at
but
it,
they say
picking
it's
up some
updating
equipment,
all
and
the
then
time.
heading
So
back
we'll
to make
look
our
into it.
plans.
We're constantly
Not very
enacting
complex
these
at all.
safeguards. So now,
We're
of
not
course,
going
the
in, we're
Secretary
not
is not
poking
wanting
it
to
with a
interface
stick.
with the federal government,
Look
and
Just
what we're
sitting
seeing
back,
are as many as
taking a look.
1/5 of the
You
people
see,
being
I
challenged.
like my
Polling place
scores
changes
like I like
often
my
result
dates.
in increased
Across the
challenges.
street
That's why
and unaware they're being watched.
It's definitely not fraud. You know, that's
All right,
not
so
true
why
at all.
this
So here's
bank
some of the
over
notes
all the
that
other
were
banks
coming
in the
out.
state?
Two roads
Why
shared
does
this one.
fortune
And
favor
in
this
the
one?
Secretary's notes, he
Another
said this
question
information is
full of good
provided for
questions.
purposes of
You're like a
administering
child whose
absentee
parents
voting.
think
Okay,
it's
so in
clever,
other words,
or
you're not
the
going to get the
IRS.
full list.
Well,
Absentee
this bank's
votes
got
are
some safety
not a
deposit
part of the
boxes,
master
and in one of
list.
those
And so
safety
you should
deposit
not
boxes
get
are some
anybody
bonds
asking
being
for
hidden
any
from the
information,
tax man
any of the
that no one's going to
absentee
report
votes
missing.
data, because that's where they're
Starting
stealing
to make
elections.
sense.
So, of course, Minnesota
Security
is
should be
riddled
light,
with fraud.
well,
Pam
relatively
Altdorf said
light.
this was sent
Light
out
if
by
your daydreams
CSI
or
for
raids
all
on the Union
87
Depository.
Minnesota
Quite
We
heavy
told
if your
them
day job is
specifically, don't
turning
give
over
her
liquor
the data.
stores and
You
gas
define
stations.
the master
And
list
the
to
bonds
exclude
in the
the
box will
absentee
be worth
votes,
more than a
all of
few
the other
rumpled
things
notes
that
from
are
a
in
till,
cover-up
so
mode
the
in
minor
Minnesota and
escalation is
Georgia
worth
and
it.
everywhere.
If
Data
you
is showing
can.
there are major
Plus, you
problems
know,
here.
the
Despite
sea
Secretary
view,
Simon's
nothing like
assertion
staring
that
at the
the
ocean while you
Clean, a
contemplate
review by
money and
Republicans
power,
on the Minnesota House
incarceration,
Elections Operations
homicide,
Committee
you know,
has
those
uncovered
weighty issues
significant
surrounding your
problems.
first
Ben
foray
Davis,
into
a member of the
serious armed
committee,
robbery.
expressed serious
I'm
concerns
assuming
about
you're
the
kind of a
Secretary's
cerebral
approach,
crew, 'cause
criticizing the invasiveness of him as the
otherwise
cover-up
this whole
continues. He
not
pointed to
talking
an
deal just
analysis
kind
of
of
the
puts you on the
records,
spectrum,
saying the
right?
data we obtained clearly
Okay.
indicates
Well, how
widespread
about we just
issues
get
that
there
call
and
into
see
question
where we're
the
at?
reliability of voter information and potentially statewide. This conflict is going on because the DOJ is asking for access to their voter files. They're not giving it to them. Hennepin also provided its complete master list to Altdorf in Hennepin. Several red flags there that we talked about, as many as 1/5 of the votes being challenged in certain locations. Now, Davis described these discoveries as alarming. There are vulnerabilities, and Hennepin is nearly 1/5 of Minnesota. So if they have these problems where 1/5 of the votes and 1/5 of the population of the state are so problematic, we need to undergo a comprehensive review, and they need some help. And we saw that from this exchange. Liz Collin sharing an exclusive saying, we need help in Minnesota. Voter
There it
integrity
is.
a
Take a
disaster.
look.
3
Drink
counties
it in.
provided partial
I've
data,
patched
but
into their
there are
security
some
feed on
findings
myself.
that were
Take a
shared
look.
on with Liz Collin
What are we looking
over
at?
on X, on
Small
the
joint,
Alpha
not
News
much security.
exchange down
Staff
there.
There's been this
crap.
ongoing battle
Especially
over
about the
access
deposit
to
boxes.
Minnesota's
Customers
voter
will
rolls.
probably
You
be
know it
thinking,
well. The
how to
federal
turn
government
this
now
into a
suing after
screenplay.
Secretary of State Steve
The boxes
Simon
are in the
has
back
declined
behind the
to
safe
provide
door.
the data
We want
unless
box
the
number
court orders it. But with
167.
all this in mind, as
Yeah, it's right
Minnesota
on the
State
highway.
Legislator
Good
who
access.
again sits on the
Works
House
U.S. Elections Committee. You requested, I know, voter data from 4 Minnesota counties. Seemed like a simple request a couple of months ago, but explain then what happened next.
Enough of this peeper crap. Let's go to the garment factory. Now, when you hit the bank, you're going to need to hack into its security system. I've written a neat little program that'll do most of the work for you, but it's probably a good idea for you to familiarize yourselves with it. You, passenger seat, I've sent it to your phone. Take it for a dry run, keep your hands steady. Maybe the wet run will be a
very
disaster.
shortly after Secretary of State Steve Simon put out a memo.
That's right. So a couple weeks after the data press went out, obviously that county told the Secretary of State's office that I was requesting this information, and he did put out a directive, and then in that directive, he redefined what we call the master list. The master list is the information of the voters that, we're holding in the counties, and that was redefined, and then it was specifically said to not give me certain information in the active voter list. He told the counties not to do that.
So I guess despite these roadblocks, you ultimately obtained voter registration data in Hennepin County. Just to be clear, you only shared your analysis, not the actual data with us in this interview. But even just your high-level analysis here, there is a lot to look at. Your analysis is based on about 830,000 records from Hennepin County, which accounts for 20% of all of voters in Minnesota. What stood out to you the most?
Yeah, it's really clear, we did assume
Hey,
that,
Mrs. Lester.
the
Place
Secretary of
looked
State
good.
put out a
Nothing we weren't
directive
expecting.
that counties
Can you
would
get the intel
comply with
together?
that,
Hard
and
copies
none
to
of the
go on a
counties
notice
that
board.
I put in this
Yeah,
request
plus all the
that
equipment we
would
spoke about.
actually,
I'll be over to
deliver
collect
that
it with
voter
those
information.
people.
But it was
Yeah.
your surprise that Hennepin County
Charming as
had
ever.
asked for my
Okay,
notes to
see
make
you
sure,
soon.
that I am who I am.
Hey,
that I'm
passenger
a
seat.
sincere,
Did you get into their
I'm
network?
a, government
Good work.
official, and I'm assuming the
She's
person
loading the
that was
hardware into the
done
back of
because
the truck.
office
Tools
looked
for
at
the
the
job,
information,
things for
looked
you to
the
wear.
law,
On a
and
job,
did
your attire
decide
will
that
depend on
I
the role
was
you're
able to
performing.
receive
As
that
the job gets more
information.
complicated, so
And
will the
Hennepin
uniforms.
County,
If you're likely to be seen by
voter
civilians,
list
you'll be
on
provided with a
January
couple of
5th, and
masks.
since I
Then
have
when you
that
go into the bank, you
information,
can choose one.
obviously, that
Excuse me!
and we do have a lot of
One
concerns
that
just with the
goes with your eyes.
surface level.
In
Hey,
particular,
there's
I know
the added
you want to
bonus of
speak
none of your
about
favorite
those
comic convention
one
outfits being linked to a major crime. Whoop-de-doo. Alright, where were we? Ah, masks. Paige. Oh yeah, we'll go over there, pick her up, and go back to your place to plan this thing. I can talk you through the planning board
What you
later.
say, young
You
lady?
might be helped by a visual aid. The rest is pretty self-explanatory. Listen to me, do what I say. Bullets go in here, come out there. And if you're ever
Or any other reason that
You're
we're
ever
seeing,
caught,
I
you
think
keep your
that
mouth
you could see
shut.
That would be your other comments had that been
I couldn't
challenged.
resist.
Yeah, that's a pretty big number. 1/5 of the votes being challenged. Seems like that is a high level. But we know that there's fraud all over the place over there. The Persistence, Scott Bressler, shared this post saying that remember in Minnesota, you're allowed to vouch for people. You can bring
There's
in
Paige.
8 other
We're leaving
people
this car,
and say
taking
they
the
live
truck.
with you, so they're here to vote. Well, here's an unlimited number that's allowed if you're in a residential
I should be
facility.
using my
Not
cane.
in a residential facility, then you can only vouch for a maximum of 8 registrants living with you. And you can do that the day of the election. So, of course, Byron Donald said in Minnesota, one registered voter can vouch for up to 8 persons without an ID. This is absurd. It's time to end the fraud. It's time for election integrity. It's time to pass the Save America Act because we want our elections not to be fraudulent. But here's more fraud happening in Minnesota. You can see this was an interesting report from ABC5 saying that there's a concept called fraud tourism taking place in America where people will travel over from Pennsylvania to get in on the grid. This is the case
Come on,
involving the
back to
2
your
men
place.
from Philadelphia who reported it was easy to rip off taxpayers here in Minnesota. Federal prosecutors have called this case fraud tourism, saying the men traveled here
Is it all
to
there?
steal from the
I think
now
so.
defunct
You want to get out and
Medicaid
check, go
program.
down the
Today,
inventory,
they
or are you
traveled
happy
back
sitting
here
there
to
making a
face the
perfect butt
consequences,
imprint in
and I
an
had
easy
the
wipe
chance
seat?
to ask them about
I'll
this.
take
They
your
called
word
it
for
fraud
it.
tourism.
Thank you.
Responded
It should
up
all be there. The clothes, guns, headsets, holdalls, masks, the drill, the files with all the photos and surveillance work. Hey, there's enough here to make us all look real suspicious. Nice little conspiracy to commit robbery charge waiting to happen.
What, they're gonna charge us with thought crime?
Not so much thought as everything with the deed crime. We'd be caught with our pants down and a hard-on out to here.
Well, we're not getting caught. These are professionals.
So I hear. The cheapest professionals money can buy.
I like to think of it as investing in new talent. And until you and me start playing low-rent Bonnie and Clyde, that's the way it's gotta be. She didn't mean anything by that, by the way. She's just a little brusque.
It's going on for a long time, and right next door in Michigan, we had a very interesting scene for the judge. You can see this judge is a foreign-born judge, as you roll by but she was appointed by President Trump, so we would squeeze this one by him. She issued a 23-page opinion out of Michigan. This is another Secretary of State who's fraudulent as they come, called Jocelyn Benson, who tries to change the rules, waive signature requirements, is an election rigger through and through. She was being sued by Harmeet, saying, you gotta give us your files because you are under obligation to comply with federal law, like everybody else is. And she said, no, put out this ridiculous decision. It's very obnoxious. Harmeet and the Civil Rights Division suing, saying, we want voter records. Michigan, like many other states, maintains a list of every person registered to vote. And so the DOJ came in and they sought access to these records under HAVA and NDRA, as you can see here. They said, we need to know whether you're complying with federal law. They want everything. Full name, date of birth, all the things. Michigan said, no, that's too sensitive. And so the judge agreed. So HAVA, the NDRA, and the CRA not allow the United States to get these records, and so the court grants their motion to dismiss. I'm very sure that Harmeet and the DOJ will not let this slide. This won't be the end of it, but as it stands, no records from Michigan, which is corrupt and fraudulent and rigged because Jocelyn Benson is the Secretary of State over there.
Respect. Isn't that right, Paige?
Blow me.
All right. You're only going to need one thing for this job. It's a high-speed armored car. Now, instead of getting one legitimately and leaving a nice long paper trail to your front door, you're going to be jacking one from a nasty Korean crew and leaving a nice long paper trail to their door instead.
This is good to go.
Okay, here's your board. Good. And when you're ready to move on the car, go over it, study the plan, tick it off the list. You must be methodical. This isn't just a dumb crime. Well, there is an element of that, huh? Oh. And when you've got the car, we'll come back here and talk bank jobs. Bank jobs.
Okay, the networks are down, the equipment is ready, and we've crippled their supplies. Mrs. Rackman has written our check and given us the green light. We're good to finally move on that submarine and stop this threat once and for all. When you're ready, get your crew together and head back to planning.
We've been doing investigations already, but now we have a federal lawsuit about it. So Judicial Watch filed an important new FOIA lawsuit over which is what is, I consider, a low-grade fever type of scandal for the left, which is Act Blue, which is a key fundraising platform for left-leaning organizations and political campaigns. Now, you may go to many left-leaning groups. You can just go and click their contribute buttons, and they often get pushed through Act Blue, which acts as a platform for contributions, both charitable contributions and political contributions. There's been a lot of concerns about the potential corruption at Act Blue in terms of managing these contributions. And so Judicial Watch knows the FEC is supposedly looking at this, and we asked for records about it, and we got the proverbial hand to the face. So we filed a lawsuit. We filed a lawsuit against the FEC for, quote, records related to alleged fraudulent donor activities by the Democratic fundraising program Act Blue. Judicial Watch filed the lawsuit in the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia after the FEC failed to respond to our FOIA request back in December. for records, including reports, audits, or investigations of ACLU's donor verification processes, donor irregularities, or potential donor fraud. Communications between the FEC's Office of Compliance and the State Attorney General's Office and the U.S. Department or the U.S. Department of Justice about any of these alleged issues that we're talking about. As I said, ACLU is a primary fundraising platform for Democratic candidates, political action committees, and progressive causes. It processes billions in small dollar contributions. According to a report last year, and it was a joint interim staff report, Fraud on ActBlue, how the Democrats' top fundraising platform opens the door for illegal election contributions. Internal documents show that ActBlue staff and executives failed to take the threat of fraud seriously. ActBlue employees regularly demonstrated unfounded belief that bad actors are not seeking to fraudulently contribute to Democrat campaigns and causes. For example, ActBlue's training guide for new fraud prevention employees instructed them to look for reasons to accept contributions rather than err on the side of flagging a suspicious donation. Altogether, ActBlue's internal documents and communications paint a damning picture. Despite repeated instances of fraudulent donations, Democrat campaigns and causes from domestic and foreign sources, ActBlue is not demonstrating a serious effort to deter fraud on its platform. At best, its conduct displays a profound disrespect for the principle that only Americans should decide American elections. At worst, it may violate the Federal Election Campaign Act of 1971, which states that persons who knowingly accept contributions made by one person in the name of another person may face criminal liability. Now, I recall the Obama gang had a problem with this. They had seemingly large numbers of foreign-based donations or material that suggested that the donations were foreign, and they didn't really do much to investigate it. Again, set up a wall. And all we're asking for what the records are about this. What are they finding? Is there anything substantial that they can share with us under the law? And as I keep on saying, they don't even give us serious excuses. They ignore or just refuse to answer with documents, as the law requires, our requests. We're asking these records under federal law. I mean, every time I say we file a FOIA lawsuit, that means government officials somewhere are breaking federal law. And unfortunately, FOIA is rarely, I would argue there's potential criminal violations of law related to thwarting FOIA, but no one's ever really pursued them. You know why? Because the Justice Department probably have to prosecute itself half the time. So this is a big issue. As I say in the release, there are legitimate grave concerns that ActBlue has enabled illegal fundraising. By failing to prevent widespread straw donor schemes and other tactics, it is likely that fraudulent and even foreign source contributions have crept into Democrat campaign coffers. So this is a big deal, big lawsuit. We hear noises about ActBlue, but we want the substance. We want to know what's going on. And if they don't have documents, we know not much is going on, and maybe more needs to be done. And this is what Judicial Watch is really excellent at. It's like these issues pop up, and often Republicans raise these issues because they need a story of the week. And they recognize there are millions of Americans who are concerned about them, so they're hoping to get them all enthused for a minute or two, and hopefully they forget about other things Republicans may or may not be doing. And then they drop the ball. Now, what Judicial Watch does is we don't drop the ball. If there's an issue out there that's substantial and worth pursuing, we don't say, well, let's not do it because it happened a week ago, which is what the city does all the time. Oh, that was a week ago. Oh, that was 2 weeks ago. That was last year. We don't want to talk about that anymore. That's old news. We're not going to investigate criminality anymore because it happened It happened before the last election cycle. That's why nothing gets done in this city in terms of accountability. They think if it's not happening today and if it's not useful today, they have zero interest in it politically. And when there's zero interest in it politically, the machinery of government doesn't do anything. Congress doesn't do anything. The agencies don't do anything. And that's not judicial watch's way. That's why we're persistent. And